Hello. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 43. Our focus is Black mental health, trauma, and its impacts across the lifespan. Our guest is Dr. Micheal Kane, clinical traumatologist. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the co-host and producer of the show. Dawn Newberg is my co-host. I'm so glad to have her with me 2 times a month. Dawn, I can't believe this is episode 43. This is actually almost the full 2-year anniversary of the show.
I know.
February 2024 is when we started, and we've come a long way. We've come a long way. I still remember when we started the show and we started talking about these issues. Started talking about our own issues first, I couldn't imagine that we'd get this far. I want to do a special shout out to people who are watching on replay because you're catching the very opening of the show. So thank you for that. A reminder that we're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. So we hope that you like the show, comment, share it with friends, let them know about today's topic, which I think will be very interesting. As I was saying, Dawn, when we first started, I had never shared with anyone that I suffered from anxiety and occasional depression, and I never would have told anyone that I saw a therapist. And I've seen many therapists over the years, but usually the transition is from when I was moving and such. And today, I am so thrilled that I get to share my therapist from when I was in Seattle. I saw Dr. Kane for about 10 years, and I get to share him with our community. That means a lot. That means a lot.
Yeah, that's very special. Very, very special. I know we're going to introduce Dr. Kane in a little bit, but when you first told me that Dr. Kane agreed to do this show, you were like a giddy little schoolboy. You were just so excited that he had agreed to come on the show. And after meeting him in the prep and talking with him, I can most definitely see why you have such admiration and respect for Dr. Kane.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. It definitely means a lot. Let's go ahead. I want to give a quick shout out to my mom watching from Tampa, Florida. Hi, Mom. Thank you for all of the support you've given. And she said it's a very interesting guest, definitely. And we also have Jim Newberg watching from Milwaukee. Jim Newberg is that way across the hall, right?
That is that way. That way.
Jim Newberg is Dawn's husband. And Dawn, I do want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish you an incredibly happy birthday yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So congratulations, as they say, on another turn around the sun.
Thank you.
I hope you were able to enjoy it. We have Kate Easton watching from Milwaukee, also downstairs, right? You're one of your close friends.
Yes.
Yes. And I am so thrilled that Rania Sabri is watching. She is tuned in once or twice before, but Rania, Pam, and I actually got together last weekend for lunch.
Nice.
This is important because if you remember 2 episodes ago, Dawn, we talked about reaching out to friends, being in touch with the people in our lives.
Yeah.
Rania and I worked together in Egypt more than 20 years ago.
Wow.
And 25 years ago almost. And she moved to Springfield, Virginia, and we exchanged a few messages. We talked about getting together. It never happened. After that episode, I reached out to her again. getting over the guilt I felt for not having talked to her earlier. And we had lunch. We talked for like 3.5 hours.
Nice.
And it was like no time had passed. I'm so glad that she was able to join us tonight. Rania, thank you. And thank you for that incredible lunch. Larry Roberts is saying hi, Dawn. Tell us who
Hi,
Larry
Larry.
is.
Larry and his fiance actually helped me sell my house. And so his fiance Denise
Yeah.
his fiance Denise is a friend of mine from high school. So Larry's helped sell my house.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. My mom wishes you a happy birthday,
Thanks,
Dawn.
Mom.
So one more happy birthday wish. When I was talking about that lunch, Rania says it was a life-saving lunch for her. Rania, I'm so glad that we're able to reconnect. I know that we were able to share a lot about what our lives have been like over the last few years. And Larry says it's our pleasure in terms of helping you with your home. So with that, I want to just give, for folks who might be watching for the first time, again, this show is Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. We get pro bono production support from Digimentors, the social and digital firm that my friend Sri Srinivasan started. And I'm always thankful for all the help that we get, the space and the time and the resources to produce this show over the last 2 years. So thank you to my friends and colleagues at Digimentors. I also want to mention that if folks are interested, let us know where you're watching from. Several people watching from Milwaukee, and my mom is from Tampa. If you haven't commented yet, drop a quick comment in Facebook and on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and just give a quick hello. So for our guest this evening, I mentioned earlier that he was my therapist when I was in Seattle. We're going to cover several topics today, and there's a chance it might be too ambitious. We're going to try and manage that conversation as best we can. But I wanted Dr. Kane to come on to share a few things. One, to talk about Black mental health, trauma that is unique to the African American experience here in the U.S. We'll also talk about the shootings in Minnesota, because that, and I know from several people that I've spoken to, that had some specific impacts on both the white community. The two people who were shot by ICE were white, but Blacks also had a particular reaction to seeing this and seeing the reaction out there. So we'll look into that a little bit, and we'll also talk about how trauma plays out in other communities and some of the challenges of working through traumatic experiences. Dawn and I have both suffered trauma in various ways, and there's a big. Dr. Kane will talk about the difference between living with trauma and living in trauma over time. So we'll explore that, and we'll close by talking about some strategies on how to how to thrive, not just survive. Dawn talks about thriving a lot, as does our friend Candace Sanchez. But what does it take to thrive? What are some strategies? Advocating for yourself, balancing, looking for calmness, etc. And I want to bring Dr. Kane on, but before I do, and he doesn't know that I'm doing this, I'm going to always throw a little bit of a curveball. I want you to read this on the screen with me. As much as I love you, I love me more. Loving me more doesn't mean I love you less. It only means I love me more. More is, if not Dr. Kane's main mantra, at least maybe his primary mantra. And I heard it, dozens of times over during my therapy with him. But it really does. If you break that down, as much as I love you, I love me more. And if you can internalize that, I think you'd go a long way. With that, I want to bring on our guest, Dr. Micheal Kane. Dr. Kane, Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Neil. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a delight to speak to your audience. I want to start out by differing between, I'm going to call it black trauma and white trauma, and how it
Sure.
is so different. I was in Seattle. We have what's called Harborview Medical Center. It's the top rated trauma center in the Pacific Northwest. When there's a traumatic accident, injury to the body, that person gets helicoptered over to Harborview. Again, it's the top trauma center in the Pacific Northwest. Now, it's physical trauma, and that is looked through the eyes of a white lens. It's physical trauma. Now, what I want to be talking about right now is black trauma, and black trauma is psychological. Okay, and it's different in terms of how trauma psychologically impacts black people as it impacts white people. There's a big difference. So let me start off with black mental health. Excuse me. With black mental health, we are a people who have gone through 407 years of being here. We came originally as an enslaved population. After the Civil War, we have the 14th, 15th, 16th amendments that allowed us freedom. But with that came other issues of segregation, the Black Codes, the Ku Klux Klan, all those things that have impacted Black life in this country. Okay, and those things have, along with other things today, have created trauma in our lifespan. Now, the thing that we want to understand about Black trauma has permanence. It never, ever goes away. Okay, it never, ever goes away. It's going to be with you to the day you die. So that means that you can have trauma as a child and live to be an old man like myself. I'm originally from New York, born in Harlem. However, I was raised in the segregated South, not the new South, the segregated South, the old South, the South where we sat on the back of the bus. We went through, we drank from color-only water fountains. We went to color-only restrooms. We were not allowed to eat in restaurants. I integrated an all-white school, which said for 2 years I was silenced, meaning that no one talked to me. And all those things are traumatic. And at the age of 72, those traumas are still with me today. Okay, so the question for us is, we either live in trauma, which means that we're going to circle around the drain, to either being a survivalist or existing, waiting for death, or we learn how to live with the trauma. Okay, and when you live with the trauma, the idea is to be able to balance that burden so it doesn't take you down. It becomes lighter as you continue to walk your landscape. Now, what is the landscape? The landscape is life, is living life. So when does it begin? Well, we want to understand that trauma is passed intergenerationally. For example, my grandfather went through World War I, and he was traumatized. He passed it on to his son, my father, who passed it on to me, who I am working at not passing it on to my daughter, but still there are things that I do that's going to be passed on to her. So it's passed on from one generation to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. So the point that I'm saying is that it has permanence, it gets passed on. And for, we don't want to differ between Black men and Black women because we both genders experience trauma. Let me talk about children, but let's look at with Black males. Where does it start? It starts in the home. Now, what does that mean? It starts in the home in terms of white homes, in terms of how Black males are perceived. Okay, it starts in home in terms of Black males, in terms of the safety net is not being created in regards to the trauma that's going to occur as they walk out the house into schools, into their adolescence, into young adulthood. We are not teaching our children, we're not preparing our children to deal with trauma. Now, mental health has not been something that's been widely accepted until I would say this young generation or the generation that's before me begin to really see the want for mental health. We have looked at mental health in a very small lens as being for crazy people, not being acceptable. A strong man doesn't need to go see somebody else, a stranger, and talk to. If you have a need, go talk to your pastor. Now, your pastor may be trained in terms of working on a religious or spiritual level, but on a therapeutic, on a clinical level, the person does not have that training. So the idea for us today is to work with a clinician who is not only working in terms of mental health, but who also has that exposure in terms of traumatic impacts. So anyway, what I was saying before is that in terms of how Black kids are perceived, that information starts at home, Black homes, white homes, and then that child goes to school. And then how that child interacts with white adults in terms of how that white adult takes his or her perceptions about Black kids, and then how that Black child interacts with the police, and how that Black child is perceived as he goes through, let's say, the educational school system, elementary, middle school, high school, and into the working world. And then how those perceptions, those stereotypes that have been developed, how does those stereotypes impact the person in the workplace or in the community? Excuse me. For example, the difference in terms of, let's say, police-induced trauma. A white family does not have to teach their child how to deal with the police. A Black family, we are starting to do that now, and much more in terms of than before. Teaching your children how to act, what to say, where to put your hands. Like, for example, with my daughter, I taught her, you're going to get stopped by the police one day. When you get stopped, put your hands on the steering wheel or on the dash. The cop comes to the door. You ask him for permission to get the wallet out of your purse. You tell him that you have no weapons, that you are not a threat to him. Okay? The idea for us is that we want our children to be turned to us alive. And this is the problem about Black mothers, for example. Can you imagine? You send your kid off to work and you pray. I have parents who put holy water on their children to pray that they're going to return home alive while they go off to work. You're praying that your child will not be psychologically and emotionally harmed at school either by a student or by a teacher. You pray that your child will not be stopped by the police on the way home. You pray, you continue to pray. You put your faith in God, which is great. And when your child does come home, how do you respond to the traumas that child may have endured in terms of either in the community or at school or in an interaction with the police? And so this is the understanding about Black trauma. And we call this trauma here, we call this race-related trauma. And again, this is not the trauma that white people have to deal with. Now, the extension of race-related trauma is what we call the trauma of invisibility. And this is where your personality, your achievements, your accomplishments, the person who you are has been totally ignored, has been totally devalued, and you do not exist as an individual. You are a stereotype. You are no longer the person. You are alone. And this is a trauma. This, again, let's remember these traumatic impacts. They take us through the lifeline, the lifespan. They continue to be with us permanent. And so the idea for us is to learn how to live with the trauma so that we are not just existing or surviving. And for the majority within our community, we are survivors. We are not moving to driving. Now, let's be clear. A person could be college educated, they could be middle class, they could be wealthy, and they could still be existing. Okay, they're not living, they're not striving, they're not driving, they're not empowered. They're doing the day-to-day things, and they're moving along, but they're not moving to the full potential because of the traumas and the mental health status that they are currently existing within. So I'm hopeful, Neil, that at least I got a basis of understanding in terms of some of the traumatic issues. But the issues in terms of Black mental health, in terms of trauma over the lifespan, is race related, is microaggressions, and microaggressions, if you can imagine being cut. Now, this is nothing about trauma. With white people or white folks, it's about the physical arrow. You get stuck in the chest. You get hit with an arrow in your chest, okay? And you go to the emergency room and they pull it out, and then they give you the medication that you need, or you get the therapy that you need in order to heal the wound. With Black trauma, it's psychological. That arrow, first of all, we can't see it. No one can see the arrow, but you can feel the arrow. And as you're seeking to heal from that arrow, then the next day or sometime after, you get hit again and again and again and again. And again, you can't. The person who you go to a white clinician or a clinician who's not experienced in terms of trauma, the person can't really see what you're feeling. You can't really understand. He or she can't understand what you're feeling because that's not their experience. You'd be surprised in terms of, I read notes about one clinician said it seems like he's just playing the black card. No, the person he's seeking to share his or her experience in terms of what it is to live in society that does not want you. And that's what we do on a day-to-day experience, this trauma, which again, I just want to say, has permanence. It's going to follow us into the grave. But the question for us is, we have a choice. We either live in it, we live in fear, or we learn to live with fear. Now, what's the difference? And Dr. Kane will say very clearly, fear is here forever. Living in fear, F-E-R, frightful experiences, assuming to be real. We're living in it. Now, living with fear, it becomes facing the experience that has happened, embracing me, embracing the individual who has dealt with that experience, acknowledging the pain, acknowledging in terms of where it is that I'm at and where I want to be, and finally responding to that pain. Okay, and this is what we want to do, is to make sure that we're making that move. This is about growing. This is about developing. This is about lightening that pain. Okay, we must want to move onward as we continue to walk our landscape. And hopefully more and more people within our community, will be pursuing mental health for emotional wellness. And by the way, I'm grateful for Neil to put my mantra on the screen. As much as I love you, and I do love you, I love me more. Loving me more doesn't mean that I love you less. It means that I love me more. And that's an issue within our community. We are not taught to love ourselves. We say it, but we're not taught it. And the reason we're not taught it is because it wasn't taught to our parents. If you're focusing on putting food on the table, clothes on a person's back, making sure that the rent or the mortgage gets paid, reinforcing self-love, loving yourself, that may not be the issue, but it's something that is needed desperately, especially when we're putting our kids out in a situation where that they're at risk, they're being targeted, they're being terrorized, and they're dealing with trauma. So this is a very important perspective, and I'm hopeful that this will continue to gauge conversation.
That was great, Dr. Kane. I really appreciate that, and it definitely lays that groundwork for understanding Black trauma in the Black community. Before I go to comments on Instagram in particular, because I see there are a lot of comments there I want to be able to read off. Dawn, I know that you wanted to jump in with a question or a thought, right?
Yeah, just something, Dr. Kane, I think like 20 years ago, I had a colleague, a Black colleague of mine, and we were having some pretty in-depth conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he asked me a question. He said, what is your ritual when you get done with work and you get in your car? And I said, I get in my car, I put my seatbelt on, I look in my rearview mirror, and I drive. And he said, do you know what my ritual is when I get in a car? I check to make sure my lights are working, my blinker is working, that I know how I'm going to get home, what route I'm going to take, any of the hot spots where there might be police officers, so that I can make sure that I'm going the speed limit. He said it takes him a good 5 minutes every time he gets in a car to make sure that he is safe. Because if he gets pulled over by the police, he does not know what's going to happen. And that was one of like the first times in my life where I had this epiphany about how incredibly privileged I am, that I don't even think about that. I don't even think about it. I get in my car and I drive. And if I get pulled over by a police officer, I get pulled over by a police officer. And I just wanted to say that because I was thinking about that when you were talking about how the lives of Black people are shaped, and how I couldn't even fathom having to think about those things every time I got in my car. So I just wanted to add that.
There's a huge gulf in understanding, Dawn, and I know in my own experience, it's a little bit different. And Dr. Kane, again, for folks who maybe have joined us after the beginning of the show, our guest today on this episode of Shining Light on Shadows, Candid Conversation about Mental Health, episode 43, in fact, our third year of the show. Dr. Kane is a clinical traumatologist from Seattle, Washington. And I'm proud to say that when I lived in Seattle, Dr. Kane was my therapist for about 10 years. And so I've come full circle from not ever mentioning that I had mental health issues, anxiety and depression, and now more recently ADHD. But I never would have acknowledged that I saw a therapist because I was too embarrassed. And it gives me great pride to share my therapist. Dr. Kane will always be my therapist, even if I'm not going to his practice or office. And no, I'm not paying you for this session, Dr. Kane. Just want to make sure that's clear right from the beginning. But it means a lot that he's here. But I do want to share kind of along the lines of what Dawn said, that when I worked at United Way, I still remember after the murders of Philando Castile and Ahmaud Arbery and others in 2018, I think it was. And of course, Black Lives Matter became the bigger thing in 2020. We had a town hall meeting. And although my parents are from India and I was born here and I have some color, I'm a person of color, my experience was one of privilege. I had a similar type of approach as Dawn did. I never thought twice about the cops pulling me over. And yeah, I was pulled over. I've been pulled over more than once, once or twice for driving a little fast in my youth. One time I remember in Seattle driving back late at night. I was actually driving too slow across the bridge on I-5, and the cop pulled me over and said, "Hey, are you okay? What's going on?" But I never feared for my safety. I never feared for my life. I never had to worry about what I was doing. But I was aware of the talk. I was aware of the experience that Black families have. And I still remember in our town hall meeting, a colleague of mine who was an older white lady just sat there with her jaw on the floor because she had never heard of the idea, of the concept, of the experience, couldn't even imagine what that would be like for people. And the one thing that I think I would point out is you can look at me and assume something about my background and maybe my experience. We could look at Dawn and make assumptions about her background and experience. And certainly in this context, we're looking at Dr. Kane and a Black man, he must have had all sorts of issues with the cops, et cetera. but you never realize what people actually know. You wouldn't know who's in Dawn's family and what experiences they've had and what she understands about other people through that. You never know who someone's spouse is. People see my wife Pam, who is half Italian, half Iranian, presents as white, and people have no idea that she has any understanding of the Indian community. So there's a deeper thing that we have to understand as a people, as a culture, that as much as we may not have personal experience with these things, the people around us might actually have some understanding. I want to give a quick shout out on Instagram. Several people are watching, including my very good friend, Dr. Walter Grayson. Thank you, Walter. Always good to have you. Stacy is watching. And one of the comments Walter has is the negation of Black pain around the world ignores an emotional gravity, a gravity well that constantly threatens to destroy us all. I'm just going to repeat that. The negation of Black pain around the world ignores an emotional gravity well that constantly threatens to destroy us all. Mark Lee, another friend from North Carolina, is watching. Mark, thank you. He says that the talk is very real. My nephews are high school kids and they have to deal with this every day. He also says the biggest microaggression is the denial of microaggression, even when plainly obvious, like in housing and banking. Sometimes we discover our ailments through therapy. It was through goodwill training that I discovered his ailments, dysgraphia. A few other people that are watching, Serena Mahogany Martin is watching from Milwaukee, a friend of Dawn's and myself on Facebook. She says good evening and says acknowledgement first is important. Deborah Kerr is watching from Fort Lauderdale. Thank you, Deborah. She says this is good work. And my friend Rania Sabri and Dr. Kane, this is how you know that we're actually making a little bit of an impact, a little bit of a difference for folks. She says that if she had known about your mantra earlier in her life, I would have been a different person. And wow. I know from my conversation with Rania on Saturday, getting a lot of background in terms of what I had missed, because we were in touch 20 years ago when I was living in Egypt, working in Egypt, but I know this to be true. And again, that mantra, as much as I love you, I love me more. Loving me more doesn't mean I love you less. It only means I love me more. The one thing I would challenge you on, Rania, is that I think based on your story, you clearly loved yourself more and did what you needed to do to take care of yourself and your daughters. And I am incredibly proud of what you did to carve out a life yourself that was intentional and kept you sane. As much as the craziness was going on around you, you loved yourself more. You should be proud of what you did, Rania. You really should. Dr. Kane, again, thank you for everything. I want to, Rania says thank you. You're very welcome, Rania. Let's talk a little bit more about trauma. We're talking about the trauma for Black folk, but let's talk about the trauma experienced by white Americans, by the white community, because they experience trauma as well. It's just different, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, what's happening right now? I have a view that white people live in an illusion, and that their illusion is being protected by privilege. And if you were getting to, if you have the opportunity to ask the question, how many white people will want to live the life of a Black person today? Please raise your hand. Please raise your hand and say that you want my life. Okay. And for the majority, the answer is no, because they know exactly what that life of a Black person is. Who in the hell would want that? Who would want to have to worry about being pulled over? When I first bought my house, I live in that right now, I got a knock on the door late at night. I opened the door. Who was it? It was the police officer. The complaint was that we saw that there's a complaint that that my house was being burglarized. What happened was someone driving by or walking by, whatever, saw a black man in this house, and therefore I didn't belong there. Again, it's about invisibility. Okay, now I'm sitting in my pajamas and I have to explain that this is my home, and I have to do it in a way that's not going to be confrontive, that's not going to be insulting. I mean, I have to do it in a way that I have to be cool, calm, and collective because I'm at risk. And that would never happen to a white person in his community. So again, it's like living in that illusion. Now, that illusion today has been shocked. It has been shooken by the shootings of two white people, Renee Good and Alex Pretate. White America will never be the same again, because they were shot they were killed by law enforcement, by the same people they depend upon in regards to protecting them from, the scourges, the black scourge, or the minorities. These are the same individuals, the same police or law enforcement that shot these two white folks. So that illusion now has been broken. And there's so much outrage that's coming out of Minneapolis and around the country. And this is a good thing. But at the same time, it's upsetting to people of color, because we've been running the risk of being shot and killed for decades, and no one said nothing. If you disobey the law, if you just have been good, if you didn't get asked for trouble, you'd have been okay. Okay, both of these individuals, these two white folks who got killed, good people, they wouldn't ask for no trouble. They were just trying to be helpful. They were trying to live good lives, and look what happened to them. And so, again, that's the difference that I'm saying, is that the illusion is broken, and now realness. Black people live what I call black realness, not reality. Well, reality has been worked to death. This is realness. And now white people they're being forced to look at this realness. Okay. And it's not pretty. So hopefully we can come together in terms of our different communities and reach understanding that we can work together and help heal the traumas and the pains that's coming to our country right now.
Chitachi Egwu is watching from Florida. Chitachi, thank you so much for joining us. And she says, indeed, to what you were just saying, Dr. Kane certainly agrees with that. I want to shift gears just a little bit, staying with the discussion around trauma. And this is something that we've talked about on the show quite a lot. For folks who don't know, we have several people who are watching tonight for the first time, several regulars who watch. So I want to just ease into this little bit of the conversation, because we always want to make sure that we're not catching people by surprise. Dawn and I have both experienced significant trauma in our lives. There are various types of trauma. In particular, Dawn was violently attacked 31 years ago now. If my math is still correct, with a couple of months, it was in the fall, was the anniversary. She was violently attacked and raped, shot and left for dead. And she's written a book about it. We've had whole shows about it. One of the things that we do on this show, when we talk about our experiences, when we talk about trauma, we don't measure them against each other. We don't say one person's trauma is worse than the other. My trauma is that I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. And it's something I've had to work through and took me a while to understand. And there's several kind of other episodes related to that. One of the things that, I talk with Dr. Kane a lot, and I know that, we've talked about in preparation for this show, is this idea of the journey of experiencing trauma and then the process of working through that trauma, getting to that point where you can live with it as opposed to living in it. So after talking about the Black experience for a bit and talking about how, different racial groups experience trauma, etc., Dr. Kane, can we talk about trauma in general and, what your thoughts are for people who've experienced trauma, how they, what would be the goal for working through that, to getting to a point where Dawn said earlier she's focused on thriving. How do you get to that place?
Okay, that's a good question. Trauma. See, and I have a cup. I have a black cup that I utilize in my practice to get my patients to understand that words matter. I do not believe that we can work through trauma. I believe that we can walk the landscape, which is life. I believe that we can learn how to live with the trauma as we continue moving on with our lives. It's not moving through life, it's moving with it along the journey of self-discovery. And so we want to make the decision that we don't want to be, our society sanctions survivorship. A person who is a survivor of domestic violence wears that badge with courage and with honor. And I say, oh my God, that's the worst thing you want to be, is a survivor, because a survivor does what they do, is that they survive. If they're not surviving, they're existing. So I call that group existing, and the survivors, I call them the walking wounded. Okay. Now the other group I call the living, those who want to live. And those who want to live, the first group of that is drivers. Imagine yourself getting in your car and you're going to go for a drive. How do you feel? You are behind the wheel. You're putting your foot on the gas and you're moving along. Well, you feel empowered. Okay. And then the idea is to become a striver, which is you're setting the pace, you're setting the distance and the direction. And then you're moving towards thriving, which is identifying what your goals are, and then the objectives that's going to help you achieve those goals. Then that is thriving. That's what Dawn has been doing. She is now at the top. But the problem is that if you're not careful, you can find yourself slipping and returning to that issue about survivorship. And so you got to stay focused in terms of where it is that you're at, what level that you're at, and where you're going. Now, how we do this, we want to do the ABC, which is the A stands for advocacy. We want to be advocates for our own emotional and mental well-being. Okay, and that is about loving the self and loving me more. Okay, and the problem of it is that our society really does not focus in regards to loving the self, especially within the Black community. The focus is on sacrificing for the family, for the church, for the community. No one reinforces self-love. Now, we may say it, but the question is, how are we reinforcing it? So the idea within therapy is to make sure that we're advocating for self, making me the number one priority in my life. And I would say to a mother who has a child, I said, who's number one in your life? My child. I said, but wait a minute. What happens if you go down or you die? How are you going to help your child? So it changes the perspective. It's important to make me the number one, to feed me first so that I can feed my children. To make sure that my emotional health is there first so that I can be that to take care of my children. So it's about advocating for self. And after the advocacy, what we want is to find the B, which is balance. Now, balance is within. Balance is within the self. Not up here, not intellectually. You want to come on down and integrate and allow it to root, that sense of balance that will allow us to go out into the world to achieve the C, which is calmness. Calmness is in our external world, our external environment. It's how we go out and how we return to our loved ones. So again, it's about ABC, which allows us to have the E, which is empowerment. Now, what Dr. Kane is seeking very clearly is letting go of power, because power is about control, to achieve balance, which takes us to empowerment. Balance within, calmness without. And so anyway, we want to understand as we move along the continuum. And the idea with trauma is that the trauma is not going to go away, but at the same time, is not going to control my life, because I'm empowered. Not that I want power, I am seeking empowerment. I'm empowered to move along and to respond to the trauma that may circle back. I might have what we call flashbacks or flashies, as we would say, some of us within the profession, flashies. And I have that flash, and it's not going to take me down. You know, it may shake me, and I'm going to, again, do the advocacy, the balance, and the calmness, and to continue moving along the continuum. So that's one thing that I would recommend.
Dawn,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask Dawn in terms of, and again, for folks who are watching, and I try and say this every episode and twice on Sundays, I look up to Dawn for her work as a thriver, as an advocate, for her work on mental health, her absolute transparency with what she shares about herself online. And it's in that context, Dawn, I'm kind of testing the theory here. Dr. Kane's comments about survivors, drivers, strivers, and ultimately thrivers. And I heard that term thriver first from you and Candace, and then his focus on advocacy, finding balance and calmness. Can you talk about how you have integrated those concepts in your work, and your recovery may not be the right word, but your journey from your attack up till through writing the book and having to read the transcripts of the legal proceedings, to giving talks and being an advocate. Can you reflect on some of what Dr. Kane said?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's not always been a linear path. And I think Dr. Kane mentioned that, right? Like you have to really stay focused on moving forward, because you can slip back. I spent probably the first 5 years after my attack being just that, a survivor, just like living to live, because that I just had to get up every day, and it was a scary place to be. Being a survivor was not how I wanted to. I just didn't. It makes you not really want to live, because you're just like swimming in your own pain, and that's a terrible place to be. For me, when I started doing advocacy work, because I thought that would help me heal. And I learned really, really quickly that I was not the only person that had ever experienced trauma. And for a long time, that's where I lived. I lived with this thought and feeling that nobody understood what I was going through, that nobody knew the pain that I was in. And when I started doing advocacy work and people started talking about their own personal experiences with sexual violence, rape, molestation, I began to realize that this was not about me. If I wanted to do advocacy work, I had to do advocacy work because I wanted to eradicate victim blaming. I wanted to focus my attention on helping other people who were going to have these experiences, because they were going to not have the same types of experiences that I had with the systems that I was in at the time that this happened to me. And so my advocacy was really around changing those systems so that people who were going to be coming after me didn't have those same experiences, like not having an advocate with them, like not having, a good criminal justice experience, like not having somebody who was informed enough to not say things that were victim blaming. um and I, I did that work for a really long time, and I think I did it really, really well. um and then when I wrote my book, as Neil was talking about, when I went through the transcripts of my trials, it was really, really triggering and traumatizing, and lots of flashbacks, and things like that, to where I had to pause on the writing of my book so that I did not slip back into that survivor mode, and that I could really focus on that balance, that calmness, so that I could be empowered. Um, Even though I wanted to get my book finished, if I would not have taken that space for myself, and if I wouldn't have stepped back and taken like another year to just work on how reading those transcripts had really affected me and my mental health and well-being, I don't think I would have ever finished my book. And if I would have pushed to finish it, it would not have been it wouldn't have been the product that I am so incredibly proud of right now. So that's kind of, when Dr. Kane was talking about those ABCs, I think about that a lot when I am, having like a really bad day, or when I'm really triggered by something, and I have to remind myself that I need that balance. I really need that balance and that calmness, so that I can do the advocacy work and that I can feel empowered by my thrivership.
And this is Dawn's book, The Blue Flower Curtain, which is an incredible read. Certainly encourage folks, if they haven't gotten a copy. I dropped the link in Amazon for folks. We have several comments that have come in, Dr. Kane, that I'd like to read out for you.
Please.
The first is from our friend Mark Lee. And actually, before that, I just wanted to give a quick hello to Paula Kiger, who was watching from the Atlanta airport. She was flying back from D.C. to Tallahassee. She was able to catch just a little bit in transit. So thank you, Paula, for doing that. Mark Lee says that relationship traumas are also very real, and sometimes it's trauma brought on by those who had trauma and try to bring it into their new relationships. You were talking about the intergenerational trauma and the work that you're doing to lessen that impact on your own daughter. But this is certainly an issue as well for interpersonal relationships, bringing that trauma along horizontally, right? Big
That's
challenge.
correct. That's correct. We bring our past with us. It's like that ball and chain that we bring into our relationships, not realizing that we have the key, that we can unlock that ball and chain, but that would require us to be processing the trauma that we are experiencing. Another particular mechanism or protocol that I would ask that we consider, I call it the 5 R's of relief. When you see, for example, that you're being impacted by the trauma, the first R is to take a respite, meaning to step away for momentarily, to give yourself the opportunity to breathe. And then after you do that, is to wrap your loving arms around self, around me, because that would be that reaction. I'm responding. I'm embracing my reaction. The third R is to be reflective. I'm going to reflect what I'm feeling at the same time what I'm thinking. My intellectual thought is also going to be triggered by this. So I want to bring balance to what's going on within my life. And then I come to the fourth, which is I'm going to respond to me, to self first, in regards to what's going on within me. And then I'm going to respond to my external environment, those who may be outside in that world that may have been part of that triggering event. And lastly, what I'm going to do is the reevaluation. And the reevaluation has what I call the 3 W's. I'm going to look at what happened. that brought on the trigger, the trauma. And then I'm going to go to the next step, which is, well, what did I learn from this? What did I learn? What did I gain from this? And the last W would be to what will I do next time? And understanding that there will be a next time, because as I said before, trauma has permanence. It's going to occur again and again and again. But the question is, not how do you react to it, but how are you going to respond to it? How are you going to bring balance to it in your own world? How are you going to get that trauma to become lighter instead of heavier? Bring balancing to it again as you continue to walk your landscape.
I certainly remember that from our therapy sessions, that the whole idea of responding as opposed to reacting to a situation. And that's certainly key. Rania has a question as well. Is tackling trauma, the trauma, different between someone who went through an experience like Dawn or myself we talked about, or someone who has lived in trauma for long periods? You were giving the African American experience, for example. Is it different if it's based on an incident versus kind of systemic?
It is different. Correct that it is. But what's consistent is that at least with the trauma that is one time, like with Dawn, is the unfortunate act of being raped and having to live with that, and first live in it, and then having to live with it, and to become the person she is today. The lot of work that she's done, that's been ongoing. Now, with the systemic traumas and stuff that's going on and on and on, these are events that are recurring, ongoing. That's the difference. We have a one-time event, then we have events that might be daily, or they're coming to at an untimely notice. You must want to be able to incorporate self-caring measures to respond to that trauma, and that's going to be the difference. That they still have impact, but at least with the one-time thing, you can say, well, it happened one time, it's not going to happen to me again. And yet with the systemic stuff, you're going to be dealing with this on an ongoing basis. And for example, you got to prepare your children to deal with these traumas on an ongoing basis. You've got to have a safe space for them to come home and to tell you, and you to be available to them. That you can help them process and let go and prepare. Process, let go, and prepare. And that's ongoing.
It's almost like
we're reacting, we're not responding. And what I want us to do is to learn how do we respond ongoing. And by the way, I want to understand that we attack the self. When we first have the reaction, it's about what did I do to deserve this? And it's not about me. It's about what's going on within my life that's impacting me. I'm sorry, Don, I cut you off. My apologies.
No, I was just going to say that it's kind of like this idea. Again, if we establish that we're not comparing one trauma against another, whether it's in one incident, in one case, or another incident, or the ongoing microaggressions that happen throughout a lifespan, I think that there's also this thought when you're talking about sexual abuse or assault. In some cases, it may just be the one time. For a lot of people, there's ongoing assault. Right. There's ongoing abuse in terms of years of trauma. But there's also the experience that someone might have, even if it's not from the same perpetrator, if they're living in their trauma, they're experiencing it on a regular basis. They're re-experiencing it. They can be triggered by something. They can be, whether they see something or hear something, and it almost has that same kind of permanence from what you were talking about in terms of systemic trauma, in terms of across the lifespan. The analogy that comes to mind is really almost like it's almost like, I can't speak from experience, but it's almost the idea of my understanding of being an alcoholic, where you're never not an alcoholic. You're just how you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. You may have gotten to the point where you can manage it and you're keeping it at bay, but it's always there in the background somewhere. whether it's a incident-based trauma or systemic trauma, it's always around you.
Correct. Always.
Which is a lot to deal with. This has been
checker, Neil.
Dawn. Sorry, Dawn.
The time checker.
Exactly. I was going to try and start wrapping up. For folks who may have joined us late, I want to remind you that as soon as we finish the show and we say our goodbyes, you'll be able to watch the show from the beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on my website. Instagram works a little bit differently, so you won't be able to watch it again there. But if you find the show, we had an incredible conversation with Dr. Micheal Kane. And I should point out for folks, if you're noticing in the advertisements for the show and in the banner under his name, it is Dr. Micheal, Micheal Kane. That's not a typo. It's Micheal. It's a family name, and he's very proud of it. And I remember he underlines that E just to make sure people know that that's intentional. But Dr. Micheal Kane was our guest. We talked about about Black mental health trauma and its impacts across the lifespan. We talked about the impact of trauma in other communities as well, and certainly some of the strategies for addressing trauma and thriving. I do want to close with Dr. Kane's mantra. Several people found it very impactful. As much as I love you, I love me more. Loving me more doesn't mean I love you less. It only means I love me more. And it means the world to me that Dr. Kane joined us today. I have a very strong, special relationship with him going back to my time in Seattle, and it is it's so much. Rania says thank you. Chitachi Egu says this was excellent. Thank you all. So thank you, Chitachi. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Apollo is watching from Philadelphia on Instagram. I want to give him a shout out as well. And Dr. Kane, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, your experience. And I look forward to my next trip to Seattle so that we can sit down and have a nice chat in person. Rania says it was much appreciated, and I couldn't say that enough. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Our next show is going to be February 26th. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.